Well, hey everyone, thanks for joining us today. My name is Chris Bennett. I'm a teacher with Blockchain Training Alliance, and we're here today to talk a little bit about blockchain. This may or may not be a technology that you've heard much about, but if you're new to it, that's okay. We're going to talk about what this technology is and why it's so exciting and why it's important generally and why it's especially important right now with everything that's going on in the world. So let's go ahead and jump in. There's a good chance that even if you don't know much about blockchain, you've already heard a little bit about it. I'm betting that most of you have already heard of something called Bitcoin. Well, if you know about Bitcoin or you've heard people talking about it, Bitcoin is just a blockchain network. It's just a type of blockchain. And there are many different types of blockchain. Bitcoin is just one. We're going to talk about some of the really cool things they can do and what makes blockchain a different tool from some of the other tools that we've been using. But we can start off, we can look back in history because it turns out, even though we spend a lot of time talking about blockchain as being something very new and exciting and high tech, blockchain is actually a very, very old approach that we're just rediscovering. And so we can actually go back in time many years ago, and we can look at one of the world's very first blockchains, or at least one of the very first ones we've been able to discover. And this happened about 3,000 years ago on a very, very small island in the South Pacific called Yap Island. And Yap Island had a very small population of people who lived on the island, a very small tribe. And they had an economy that worked a lot like ours. They had coins, just like we had coins. And they used these coins to buy and sell and trade things. They used limestone coins, and they called them raystones. So they were just like the coins that we use today, except there was one difference, and that is these raystones, the coins that they used on Yap Island, were very, very, very big. These stones, some of them could be over 12 feet tall and weigh over 8,000 pounds. And you can see a picture of this man standing in front of one of these raystones. And so this created a really interesting problem on Yap Island that we don't have to deal with our coins or our money. And that is, how do you have an economy? How do you use this money? How do you have trade and finance and purchasing in this economy where you can't physically exchange your coins, where they're so big, there's no way to trade them back and forth? And so what they did on Yap Island, they had a very, very simple idea that they followed. What they did is they took each of these big coins like this and they put each one in a memorable place somewhere on the island. So we might have a coin over by the pond. We might have one of these coins over by the forest. We might have another one of these coins over on the beach. And everyone just knew what coins belonged to who. They kept a mental record of it. So let's say that you and I wanted to trade. Maybe I own that coin over by the pond, and you had a bunch of livestock, and I decided I wanted to become a rancher. And so you and I sit down and we talk, and we come to an agreement, and we decide that you'll sell me some of your livestock if I give you that coin that I own over by the pond. And so once we reached that deal, what you and I would do is we would stand up in front of the rest of the tribe, everyone else on the island, and we would announce that trade. We would announce that transaction. We would announce to everybody else that I'm going to give you that stone by the pond. You're going to be the new owner of it. And in exchange for that, I'm going to get a bunch of livestock. And so everybody on the island from that point forward, they just knew in their heads that that coin doesn't belong to me anymore. Now it belongs to you. And it's going to keep belonging to you until you decide to spend it or trade it for something else. So it works just like the coins that we have today, except we didn't physically trade them back and forth. We kept this record in our head of who owned which coins. And in the blockchain world, this record of important things that we care about, we call it a ledger. It's just a word we use in the blockchain world. It just means a record or a log or a history of the important things that we care about. And so what happened on Yap Island was very interesting, because if we had to solve this same problem today, there's a very good chance that we would take a different approach than what they did on Yap Island. On Yap Island, they took a decentralized approach, and that meant that everybody, everybody on the island was responsible for keeping track in their head of who owned which coins or stones and how they were spent. Well, if we were going to solve this problem today, there's a good chance that instead of making everybody keep track of that information, we would just pick one person to keep track of that information. We would take what we call a centralized approach, because everything is centralized around that one person. And if we took this approach, we might call that one person a bank or a banker. And that's just what a bank does today. It keeps a record of all of its customers and how much money is in each of the accounts of those customers. And when those customers spend money or receive money, the bank updates that record, that ledger. And this centralized approach has some benefits. It's much more efficient. If you think about what happened on Yap Island, everybody had to keep that record of who owned which coins. If we take this centralized approach and the banker worries about it, then the rest of us, all of us who aren't the banker, well, we can go do other things. We don't have to bother remembering or keeping track of who owns which coins. So if we take this centralized approach, it's more efficient, but we have to make sure of some things. We have 4 real big problems that we need to address. First of all, we need to make sure that whoever we pick to be our banker is someone that we can trust, that we pick someone honest, because if there's only one copy of that data, and the banker has access to it and controls it all, well, if we don't have a trustworthy banker, that banker might decide to just go find his account or her account on the ledger and just add a bunch of extra zeros and unfairly give themselves a bunch of money that wasn't really theirs to begin with. So we need to make sure that that banker can be trusted. And if we pick a banker who can be trusted, then we need to make sure that that banker keeps the ledger secure, that they protect it. Because it's no good to have an honest banker if they don't protect the ledger. If as soon as they turn their back, someone else can come change the records and find their account and add a bunch of zeros to the end and steal money unfairly. So we need to make sure our banker can be trusted and our banker protects that ledger and keeps it secure so no other untrustworthy people can gain access to it. Now we need to make sure that that banker is highly available, right? If you and I want to have a transaction, but that banker isn't there to record it, well, we just have to wait until that banker is available. And we don't know if that's going to be a few minutes, a few days, a few months. We don't know. So whoever we pick to be that banker needs to be available a lot of the time so people can trade and transact and exchange money with each other. And then last, we need to make sure that that banker doesn't make any accidental mistakes, that they don't accidentally add an extra zero to someone's account or make a payment bigger or smaller than it should be. So we have a lot of worries or a lot of concerns if we just pick this one person in the middle to be the banker. But the way it worked on Yap Island, where everybody was a banker, where everybody kept track of these records, well, it meant that we didn't have to worry so much about a lot of these problems, because if everybody is keeping a record of who owns which stones or which coins, and one of those people is dishonest or untrustworthy, well, so what? It doesn't matter. If that one person wants to change their copy of the record and say that they own all the stones on the island, well, everybody else on the island is going to disagree with them. And in the blockchain world, we assume that whatever the majority believes the truth to be, that's what we assume the truth is. On Yap Island, it doesn't matter if one people or a few people don't keep that ledger secure. If an attacker can get in and change the record in one place, but they only do it in one place, it doesn't matter. They would have to change that record in multiple places in order to pull off their hack. On Yap Island, if we have one person who's not available, they're sick, they're on vacation, they're sleeping, they're on the other side of the island, well, that doesn't matter. Everyone else can still record that transaction. They can still update that ledger in their head. And when that missing person or people come back, we can just tell them what happened when they were gone. We can get them all caught back up. And finally, if we have one person who makes an accidental mistake, well, so what? That's not as big a deal because the odds of all of us making that exact same mistake accidentally are so low that we don't even bother to think about it. So by using blockchain, by taking this decentralized approach, we don't have to worry about a lot of the same things that we spend a lot of time in our modern life today worrying about. So how does all this work in the modern world? How does something like Bitcoin work? Well, we're going to take a look at it. But really, if you look at something like Bitcoin or blockchain technologies today, we're really just using computers to do all the same work that everyone on Yap Island did 3,000 years ago. So just like on Yap Island, if you and I want to trade, maybe I owe you some money and I'm going to pay you. Well, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to announce that transaction. Just like on Yap Island, we stood up in front of everybody else and we announced that, hey, I'm going to give you my coin by the pond and you're going to give me some of your livestock. Well, on a network like Bitcoin, we do the exact same thing. We start off by announcing the transaction to everybody else, to the rest of the network. On Yap Island, once that transaction was announced, everybody updated the record in their head. Everybody knew, hey, that stone over by the pond, that doesn't belong to Chris anymore. Now that belongs to you. You're the new owner of it. Well, on a blockchain network like Bitcoin, the second thing that we do is each computer, each server, we call them nodes or miners in the blockchain world. They record that transaction, they document it, they update their copy of the ledger. And then every once in a while, all of these different computers are going to stop and compare notes. They're going to make sure that they've recorded the same information and they're staying in sync. And if any of those servers or nodes have missed a transaction, they'll get caught up. Just like on Yap Island, if someone wasn't around and we had some transactions, well, as soon as they came back, we'd tell them what they missed. We'd get them synced up. So let's say that we have a Bitcoin payment. We have two friends, Hassan and Marcia. And Marcia agrees to do some work for Hassan, to help him out. He's got some chores to do around the yard. And so Marcia agrees to help him, but she's not going to work for free. And they decide that 1 Bitcoin is a pretty fair price for that. So when it's time for Hassan to pay Marcia for her help, the first thing they're going to do is they're going to announce their transaction to the Bitcoin network. They're going to say, hey, Bitcoin network, I'm Hassan, and I want to take one of my Bitcoins and give it to Marcia. So you can see at the beginning, Hassan had 10 Bitcoins and Marcia didn't have any. And now at the end of this transaction, we're going to take one of those from Hassan, so he'll only have 9, and we'll give 1 to Marcia. So the first thing we do is we announce this transaction to the rest of the network. And on the network, we have all of these servers. And remember, on a blockchain network, we can call them servers or nodes or miners. But these are just different computers out there on the blockchain network. And each one of them is going to record that transaction. Each one of them is going to record the fact that Hassan just gave one of his Bitcoins over to Marsha. And if you look at what's happening here in this drawing, we have 3 different servers. And look at server 3 over here, the very last one on the right. You can see it accidentally recorded this transaction as wrong. It accidentally recorded that Hassan was going to pay Marsha 2 Bitcoin, not 1. But that's okay. We'll see in a little bit how that mistake gets taken care of. So we announce our transaction, and then all the computers on the network record that transaction. And then periodically, they're all going to stop, and they're going to see, hey, do I have the same data? Did I record the same transaction information as all of the other computers on this network? And so when this happens, remember in our last step, this third computer or server here, it recorded the transaction wrong. It made a mistake. It recorded 2 Bitcoin, not 1. So in this step, when they all compare their notes and they're asking themselves, hey, do I have the same data as the majority of the network? Where you'll see this third computer or server over here, it says, no, I've got something different. Everyone else thought this was a 1 Bitcoin transaction, but I recorded it as 2. I've got something different. Well, no problem. Our computer here, our node, it can just go get the right answer from the rest of the network. Once it realizes it doesn't have the same answer, the right answer that everyone else has, it can just throw away that answer and get the right one from the rest of the network. So it asks the rest of the nodes, hey, give me the right data for this transaction. And they hand it over. And so now all of our computers are in sync. They all show that 1 Bitcoin was sent from Hassan to Marsha. And so if you've ever wondered about how Bitcoin works, this is exactly how it works. And we can, for example, take a look at sampled transactions, real transactions happening out there on the internet right now. So here's a transaction that happened almost an hour ago. And we can see that whoever this account owner is sent some money to whoever this account owner is. So in our example, this might be Hassan's account, and this might be Marsha's account. And then we can see what kind of payment was made. So in this case, it was almost $8,500 that was paid from this account to this account. And all we've done on the blockchain network is record this transaction in multiple places. This is a very important concept in blockchain, this idea that important information, the information we really care about, isn't just stored in one place, it's stored in multiple places. I'll talk in just a minute about why keeping things in multiple places is such an important idea and why it adds so much to blockchain. So you might think that blockchain is just money. It's just digital money. And if that's what you think blockchain is, you're right. We have things like Bitcoin. Bitcoin was the very first blockchain or computerized blockchain in the world. And so all of these early blockchain solutions, what happened on Yap Island and Bitcoin, they're all focused on using this ledger to record financial information, to record people sending money back and forth, giving and receiving funds. But that doesn't mean we can't use blockchain for more than just money. We can use this ledger to record any kind of important information, not just information about people sending or receiving payments. So people can and do use the blockchain for recording things like weather information. Voting information. There have been some countries that have experimented with using this technology to run their elections, countries like Estonia over in Europe. Stock prices, other kinds of financial information that aren't just payments, sports scores and statistics. There are a lot of people who are interested in using this technology in the healthcare world. How can we make sure that doctors and nurses and patients are getting good information and they're taking the right steps? We'll talk a little bit more about that at the end of this presentation. And supply chain information, knowing if I'm going to buy a product, where did it come from? How did it get to the store shelves? Is everything that's printed on the packaging actually true? Can I trust what I see in the commercial for this product or not? So right now we hear about blockchain with things like Bitcoin and solutions that deal with payments and money. But part of what makes blockchain so exciting is it doesn't have to just be focused on payments and money. It can be focused on more than money as well. And I mentioned one of the real important things about blockchain is that this information is stored in multiple different places. If we go back and we look at our sample transaction, remember, once Hassan and Marcia announced this transaction, it didn't just get recorded on one server or one computer. It got recorded on every single computer on the network. So in this example, if we had 3 different computers on the network, we would be storing this data in 3 different places. And this is important because sometimes you want to store important information in more than one place. Let's say that we have another 2 friends. We have Jerome and Leanna. And just like Hassan and Marcia, there's a debt. Jerome has borrowed $10 from Leanna, and now he has to pay her back. So when Jerome borrows this money, we might document this fact. We might write down on a piece of paper somewhere, Jerome owes Leanna $10. And let's assume all we do is record that, document that on just one piece of paper. So there's only one piece of paper that records how much money Jerome owes to Leanna. Well, if there's only one piece of paper, Leanna could decide, hey, I'm going to take a risk. I'm going to wait until nobody's looking, and I'm going to go up to that piece of paper, and I'm going to change what's written on it. So instead of that piece of paper saying that Jerome owes me $10, I'm going to add some zeros to the end. And now Jerome owes me $10,000. Well, if nobody caught Leanna doing this, she could get away with it. She could steal a lot of money that isn't hers. She could make Jerome have to pay back a much bigger debt than what he really owes. And that's because the only place we can go to see the truth about this debt is on this one piece of paper. So if anything happens to that one piece of paper, we could be in a lot of trouble. Well, if we decide, hey, this is a really important piece of information, let's not record it in one place. Let's record it and store it in many different places. Well, now if Leanna wants to do the same thing, she has a lot more work, right? If Leanna just goes like she did before and she changes that record in one place, well, now that's not enough anymore. It used to be enough just to change it in one place, but now it's not. What we were talking about is important information. It's good to store it in more than one place. Right? And we were talking about Jerome and Leanna. Jerome owes Leanna some money. Well, what if Leanna wants to be dishonest and make Jerome pay much more than he actually owes? Well, if we store this information in one place, it's very easy for someone like Leanna to come change this information. But if we store it in more than one place, Leanna has to do a lot more work. She can't just change it on one of these pieces of paper now. She has to change it on the majority of them. So if we had 8 pieces of paper, she'd have to not just change it on the one, but she'd have to change it on at least 5 so that the majority of the pieces of paper said it was a $10,000 debt, not just a $10 debt. And this is one of the big valuable pieces of blockchain. It's not a perfect solution. It can still be hacked. Dishonest people can still, if they work really hard, do dishonest things. But we've made it a lot harder to be dishonest than it is with conventional technology. And so this is one of the valuable things about blockchain. If we have really, really important information, we usually don't want to keep that information in just one place. We usually want to keep that information in many different places so we have a backup and we have a little extra security. So blockchain is a great technology to use if you're working with this kind of information that is very, very important, that you need to make sure doesn't get changed or hacked or altered by someone who's dishonest or careless or anything like that. So let's talk a little bit about why all this matters. And we can use a very, very simple example, pretend example, to think about all this through. So let's say that we have a farmer, Charlie, and Charlie grows apples on his orchard. And Charlie competes with all these other different apple farmers at the grocery store to get customers to buy his apples and not somebody else's apples. And so one day Charlie has an idea. Charlie says, you know what, I'm going to create an app for your smartphone. And you can download my app, and then when you go to the store and you see my apples sitting on the shelves, you can start up this app and you can use your phone to scan a barcode on the box of apples. And as soon as you scan that code, you're going to see right there on your phone where these apples came from. You'll see that they grew on Charlie's orchard, and you'll be able to see how they were treated. And you'll be able to see when they were harvested and when did they get delivered to the store and how long have they been sitting on the store shelves. And Charlie thinks, hey, if a customer is trying to decide what brand of apples to buy, and they see that they can get all of this information about my apples that they can't get about anybody else's, well, they're probably going to want to buy mine because they'll see how good and fresh they are. They'll see that they're really organic and that they've been grown to be very clean and free of pesticides and things like that. So Charlie has this great idea to build this smartphone app. But for you to be able to go to the store and use that app and buy those apples, there are more people involved than just Charlie. So all of this starts with Charlie because Charlie owns and operates the orchard where all the apples are grown. But we need to get some other people involved in order for you to be able to buy those apples. For example, we have Margaret. Margaret owns a company that helps out farmers like Charlie. Margaret owns this company and all of her customers are farmers, and Margaret's company goes around and she checks on the health of all the crops for each of the farmers that she works with. And if a crop has gotten infested with bugs or some kind of pest, well, her company might spray those plants with pesticide if it's needed. And if there's some sick plants, if Charlie's got some sick trees on his orchard, Margaret's company has people that can come in and heal the trees and help cure whatever disease or ailment is hurting them. And Margaret's company works with many different farmers. Charlie just happens to be one of them. So Charlie grows the apples on his orchard, but then he hires Margaret and her company to really make sure that those trees are healthy and those apples are healthy and that he gets a nice, good, fresh harvest. But it doesn't stop there, right? Eventually those apples are going to be grown, those nice, healthy apples, and they're going to be ready to be harvested, picked off the trees and packaged, loaded up into boxes so they can be delivered to the store. And Charlie's just one person. He can't do all this work. There are too many apples for him to pick alone. So he's got someone else that he works with. He works with Lisa. And Lisa owns a company that helps farmers harvest their crops. So anytime it's time to harvest your apples or your corn or your potatoes or your peaches or whatever you're growing, you can call Lisa. And Lisa's company will show up. And they'll have a bunch of people that will help you with that harvest. They'll help you pick those items and get them washed and packaged up and ready to go to the store. And Lisa also works with many different farmers. Charlie just happens to be one of those farmers or one of those customers. But Lisa's company works with many different farmers, just like Margaret does. All right, well, we still have more people involved. We have Charlie's growing the apples. We have Margaret, who helps make sure those apples and the trees that they grow on are healthy and don't have pests. We have Lisa, who steps in and makes sure that those healthy apples get harvested, packaged up, but we still need to get them to the store. And that's where Chloe comes in. Chloe owns a trucking company. And her drivers go and pick up and deliver all of these apples. So they're the ones that pick them up from the farm and deliver them to the store. And just like Margaret and Lisa, Chloe works with many different farmers. She has many different customers. Charlie just happens to be one of them. So Chloe delivers all different types of things: apples and oranges and peaches and bananas and socks and cans of deodorant and toilet paper and anything that store needs, she might be delivering. Charlie's just one of her customers. All right, well, now we've got the apples to the store. But now we need to get those apples out on the store shelves so the customers can see them and come in and buy them, so they can use that app and see all that great information Charlie wants them to see. And so that gets us to our final participant. We have David. And David's the manager at your local supermarket. And David's the one who's responsible for making sure that all those shelves are nice and fully stocked and have all the things you want to buy. So when Chloe shows up with that delivery of apples, David and his team are the ones who unload the truck and take them out of the packages and set them up on the display stand in the produce section so you can come in and buy them. And David, he's managing the local supermarket. So they sell more than just apples. They sell all different kinds of food and products and toiletries and household goods and pet food. So David carries many different products. Charlie just happens to supply one of them. And so all of these people put together create Charlie's supply chain. You're probably hearing a lot about supply chains in the news right now. When we talk about a supply chain, all we're doing is talking about all the different participants involved in getting something from its source to its destination. So in order for you to be able to use this app on your phone that Charlie created, we need to get data, information, not just from Charlie, but also from Margaret and Lisa and Chloe and David and all the other people who are part of getting these apples into your store. If you're going to look on your phone and you're going to see, here's when the apple trees were planted, and here's how they were treated, and here's when they were harvested, and here's when they got delivered. Well, that means you need to get information not just from Charlie, but from all of these people. Because if Charlie wants his app to show down here at the bottom, here's when these apples got delivered to your store and put out on your store shelf. Well, Charlie doesn't know that. Only David, only the supermarket manager knows that information. So each of these participants have to contribute a little bit of information to the picture. So in a world without blockchain, in the world before blockchain, we did this with tools like a database. And we could set up a database. And a database is great because each of these different participants can contribute information to the database. So everybody can put just the information they have into the database, and then the database keeps all of it. And then all the information that Charlie needs to make his app work on a smartphone lives right here in the database. And that works great, but we have some big questions to answer because databases have an owner. They have an administrator. They're not shared. And so we need to figure out if we're going to use a database and we've got Charlie and Lisa and Margaret and Chloe and David all working together, well, which one of them is going to own the database? Which one of them is going to pay for the database? Which one of them is going to determine who gets access to the database? And how are the rest of this, the people in this supply chain, what are they going to do if someone decides to leave? If Chloe decides to go start another business or to do something different? These can be very, very difficult questions to answer. Well, let's say in this case, because it was Charlie's idea originally to create this app, we'll just say, all right, Charlie owns the database because he's the one who wants to build this smartphone app. And because he owns it, we'll say, all right, Charlie, you got to pay for it too. You got to pay that bill every month. And Charlie says, that's okay. It's worth it to have this cool app for my customers. That also means Charlie, because he owns the database, gets to decide who has access to it. So Chloe might take some of her information about trucking and delivering those apples and put it into a database. That's Chloe's information. But then Charlie gets to decide who sees Chloe's information and how much of it do they get to see. And Charlie may make decisions about what to do with his database that Chloe doesn't agree with. So how could we solve this same problem in a world of blockchain if we use blockchains instead of databases? Well, it's a very similar looking solution, but look in a database, everybody's putting all their information into this database that Charlie owns. In the blockchain world, we could set up a blockchain network, and rather than Charlie owning the whole network like he would the whole database, Charlie only owns a small part of the blockchain network. All of these participants, Chloe and Margaret and David, all of these participants add their own servers or computers to the blockchain network. And they put their data on their computers, and they don't ever have to give up ownership of it. So now Charlie can't make a decision about who to show Chloe's information to. Only Chloe gets to decide who she wants to share her information with. And so all of these questions that we had to answer, who owns it? Who pays for it? Who controls access? What do we do if someone joins or leaves the group? Well, in the world of blockchain, these aren't such difficult questions to answer anymore. And where this really becomes powerful is, let's now assume that there's another farmer, that Charlie creates his smartphone application and everybody loves it. And they think it's a really, really great idea. And so another farmer in the area, Paula, decides she wants to build an app on a smartphone for her customers. And Paula grows peaches, just like Charlie grows apples. And she wants the same thing. She wants any customer to be able to go into a store and pull up her app and scan that code on a box of peaches and see the same things. Where did these peaches come from? How were they treated? When did they get harvested? How did they get delivered? How long have they been on my store shelf? Well, Paula, just like Charlie, she works with the same people. She hires Margaret's company to make sure that her peach trees are healthy. And she hires Lisa's company when it's time to harvest those peach trees. And she hires Chloe to deliver those harvested peaches to the grocery store. And when they get to the grocery store, David's still the supermarket manager, and he's also got to get those peaches out there for his customers to buy. Well, if we didn't have blockchain, Remember when Charlie wanted to do this? Charlie set up his own database and everybody else put their information into Charlie's database. So if Paula is going to come around and do the same thing, well, now Paula is going to set up her own database and everybody's going to have to put their information into Paula's database as well. So look at Chloe here driving the delivery truck. If Chloe's delivering Charlie's apples, she has to put information about that into one database. If Chloe's delivering Paula's peaches, she needs to put information about that peach delivery into a separate, completely different database. And this can just keep getting bigger and bigger. Maybe Paula is now delivering a load of avocados, and that avocado grower wants to do the same thing that Charlie and Paula are doing. Well, now Chloe has to know to go send that information to a third database. And all of this is a very, very big distraction, because what Chloe should be doing is just focusing on delivering those items, to the stores in her community, on being in that truck as long as possible. Chloe shouldn't have to worry about managing all of these different database connections. That's not her main job. So old technology like databases make all of these people spend a lot of time worrying about something and focused on something that's not their main job. In a world of blockchain, if Paula comes along and wants to do something just like Charlie, well, we don't have to create a whole nother database. We can just add Paula in to the same blockchain network that Charlie's on. And now, look how much easier life is for Chloe, our truck driver. It doesn't matter whether she's delivering apples or peaches or plums or grapefruit or toilet paper or deodorant or any of these other things. She just takes all of that information and puts it onto the same blockchain network. And that means we can add all of these different farmers into our solution. And we can have all of these different apps for all different types of food in the grocery store. We can make our networks much bigger and much more complex than they would normally be. Now, all of this is important when things are normal and times are good. But all of this becomes even more important with what we're going through right now. Because one of the great things that blockchain can do is it can give us very accurate and timely information about these supply chains. We can get more information about what these supply chains are and how items move through them. And if we can see those supply chains better, it becomes easier to identify where we have weaknesses or delays. This can allow us to create more complicated supply chains, and it makes those supply chains stronger. And this is something that we're talking a lot about right now, because we need to make sure that the really critical supply chains in the world around us continue to keep functioning well as we go through this pandemic. So we have some very critical supply chains we have to make sure continue to function. We have to make sure that supply chains for food and water keep working, that people are able to keep getting the food that they need, that they have clean water to drink, that their families can eat, that they can feed their pets, that their neighbors and the community around them have enough to eat and have clean water. We need to make sure that our medical supply chain, our supply chain for different medicines and healthcare equipment, that's good and strong. We need to make sure that people are able to get access to the right medicine when they need it, and that our healthcare workers can get enough gloves and face masks and enough medical equipment to treat all the people who get sick. Our personal hygiene supply chain is very important. Everyone is talking on the news about how toilet paper is sold out. How do we make sure that there's enough toilet paper for everyone and everyone still has shampoo and soap, and we can still brush our teeth and stay clean and healthy while all this is going on. And maybe most important, we have a supply chain around information. How do we make sure that everybody's getting the right information that they need to stay healthy and to stay safe? How do we make sure that they're getting that information in a timely fashion? They're hearing it when they need to hear it. And that the information that people are getting, they can trust. That they're not hearing false news or a story that someone made up or doesn't have any credibility. So we have some very, very important supply chains right now that we need to protect. So any technology like blockchain, which helps strengthen these supply chains, is going to be very, very important in the coming weeks and months. We can look at another example of what's happening right now. So right now, all these different governments around the world are talking to drug companies, and they're asking drug companies to start working on a vaccine for the coronavirus. And this isn't just happening here in the United States. This is happening all over the world. So the US government is asking drug companies to start working on a vaccine. And the French government is doing the same thing. And the Chinese government is doing the same thing. And the South African government is doing the same thing. All these governments around the world are doing this. And so that means all of these drug companies are going to start working on a vaccine. But in order to do that, they're going to have to work with other researchers and university labs. They're going to have to consult with doctors and hospitals and clinics to figure out what is the right formulation for the vaccine. And then once that drug company thinks they've got a good formulation, well, then they need to make some so they can test it. So those drug companies are going to have to work with suppliers all around the world so they can get all the ingredients that they need to go ahead and make that vaccine. Once the drug companies have made a vaccine, well, then they need to work with doctors and clinics and hospitals all around the world to test that vaccine and make sure it does what it's supposed to do and it's safe and it doesn't have any bad side effects that we need to watch out for. If these drug companies have a good test, well, then they need to work with these same governments to get that vaccine approved for human use so they can get it out to everybody who's sick and start healing people and making them better. Once those governments approve that vaccine, well, then these drug companies need to work with manufacturers to start making as much of that vaccine as possible because we're going to need a big supply of it. Once the manufacturers start manufacturing that vaccine, they're going to have to work with different transportation companies, shipping companies, trucking companies to distribute that vaccine, to get it out to doctors and hospitals and clinics all around the world so it can be given to patients who need it the most. Those transportation companies are going to have to work with those doctors and clinics and hospitals to figure out where and when to deliver that vaccine. Which hospital needs it the most? How many boxes do I give hospital A and how many should I give to hospital B? Those doctors are going to have to work with patients and other doctors and hospital staff to figure out who should receive that vaccine and when should they receive it and should they receive any other treatment at the time. And finally, those doctors and patients are going to have to provide feedback to the drug companies. Hey, did the vaccine work like we expected it to? Were there any side effects that popped up that we didn't know about? So if we're going to treat this disease, if we're going to end this pandemic, we need to get governments and drug companies and universities and doctors, hospitals and clinics, ingredient suppliers, manufacturers, transportation companies, and patients all to work together. And if we didn't have a technology like blockchain, we would have to decide whose database are we going to put all this information into? Is there any one of these participants who should own and control all of the data? Well, maybe we say, We'll make the government set up a database, and all of these other participants can just use the government database to put their information into. Well, okay. But then we have to figure out, okay, which government's database? Do we put it in a database that the US government set up? Do we put it in a database that the government in China set up? Do we put it in a database that the Peruvian government set up? What we really need is something like blockchain, where this solution can be shared and ownership and control can be shared with all the participants on the network. Because we shouldn't let any one of these participants have much more power or control or influence than the others. And that's what makes blockchain such a critically important technology, especially right now, especially with what's going on today. So if you're excited or you think any of what we've been talking about is interesting and you want to learn more, this is a great time to jump into blockchain. Or if you're just interested in technology and computers in general, this is a great time to learn about technology, because right now, one of the things the world needs most is good, qualified technical people to go out and to help build these kinds of solutions. They don't exist yet. And we're going to need everyone we can to help us build out some of these types of solutions. So if you're interested in learning more about blockchain and you want to start building your own blockchain solutions, probably the best place to start is to start learning about computer programming, to start learning some of the basics of coding and developing. It's not hard. In fact, everything you need to know about computer programming, you already know. Really, it's just learning the words and the terms. How do we describe these ideas that you already know and understand very well? So if you're interested in learning more about that, about where to get started with programming, well, you can join us on Wednesday right here, same time, same place. And we're going to talk about the basics of computer programming and how to get started. If you want to go and learn on your own, one of the best resources to get started is a site called W3 Schools. You can go to w3schools.com, and this is a great interactive website where you can learn all of the different web development technologies in small, bite-sized, step-by-step lessons. If you've already done a little programming and development, you want to try out blockchain, well, one of the real fun things you can do as a first blockchain project is you can go create your own coin. And you can follow the link here in this slide. This is a good instruction on how to go through and actually build your own coin or token. And so this can be a fun one. You can go set up your own cryptocurrency wallet and you can create your own coin and you can trade them with friends and family. You can make your own money and spend it however you want. And finally, if you want to dive deeper into blockchain and learn more, we've got some great classes on that. And if there's an interest for a kids-focused class on blockchain, let us know if that's something you'd be interested in, because if that's something that enough people are interested in, we would love to be able to go and create a course geared just for kids and for young folks to learn more about this technology and to get hands-on with it and to learn how it might help shape your future and the future of the world. So hopefully this has got you excited about this incredible new technology, and you can see why it's such an important technology, especially with what's going on right now. Like I said, Wednesday we'll be talking about coding and development and programming. Tomorrow, same time, same place, we're going to be talking about smart devices and IoT, the Internet of Things. So I hope to see you guys back here tomorrow and Wednesday. Like I said, if this is something that you'd like to learn more about and you'd like us to create a course around, let us know, because that would be something enjoyable for us if it would provide some value to you. So thank you guys for carving out some time and joining us. It's been a pleasure.